This is the Lake District, a World Heritage Site stretching over 2,362 square kilometres. Neil Gresham is a Lake District local obsessed with finding hard, unclimbed lines. This is the story about Neil's first ascent of Final Score, a new E10 7A. As climbers, COVID has affected the way we practice our sport and train. This is even more pronounced for pro athletes. Neil decided to act positively. He used the lockdown period to improve, gaining strength for a potential mega project.
So certainly COVID has amplified the mentality or the approach that I use all the time in climbing, which is kind of like hide away, lock myself away, train, explode out and do my project. In a way, it's been no different for me. That's kind of business as usual. But I do think that lockdown really gave myself and many other people a chance to reflect on their climbing, how it's been thus far, where they want to take it, what their goals are, what their priorities are, and also do some stuff which let's face it, none of us would have done otherwise, which was like that much fingerboarding and that much supportive conditioning and flexibility. You know, most people came out of lockdown with stronger fingers, feeling more flexible and feeling less injury prone. These were all really, really good things. But no doubt for me, the most powerful aspect of lockdown was that feeling cooped up, feeling frustrated. Right, I want to go and do something with this now. You know, I've put this work in, so I want to go out and cash in.
Crag is an imposing piece of rock. The notorious trad route If 6 Was 9 sits at the bottom, with a potential death fall crux and worryingly hard moves above bad gear. This has not seen many ascents. First climbed by Dave Burkitt and then repeated by Dave McLeod and Craig Matheson, Neil planned to climb this route, then continue to the top of the crag.
If 6 Was 9 goes 2/3 of the way up the wall and then traverses off along a break and then finishes up the easier ground to the right, and that theoretically there's no reason why someone who's up for it shouldn't take it the whole way. And stuff like that always really drives me. And sure enough, when I went to Crag, I looked at If 6 Was 9 and you're like, wow, that is incredible. And then you're like, wow, wouldn't it be even more incredible to just keep going? Just take it all the way up. As soon as I started looking at the route on an abseil rope, I just thought, crumbs, that's just got to be the challenge, hasn't it?
So Neil had a plan. But first he had to send If 6 Was 9, as much a mental battle as a physical one. Some of the footage you're about to see is from Neil climbing on the same crag, but the direct finish to Ironman.
If 6 Was 9 is definitely regarded as a top-end E9, and it's also got a little bit harder in recent years. Craig Matheson repeated it last November, and in the state he did it, the first piece of protection used to be a nut behind a block. The block fell out and there's now a peg which is lower down, meaning that if you fall off the first crux, you're going to hit this ledge below, which isn't particularly nice. It's like quite a knacky, on-offy sort of V7 undercut move. So that feels a little bit more stressful than it perhaps would have been. And then this crucial top crux, the move that McLeod talks about, where you mustn't fall off because the gear is pretty marginal. I mean, McLeod was really right, because that gear was a peg in another block, which also fell out, like literally under its own weight. And Craig Matheson replaced that with a peg, but it's like the shortest length knife blade, which is probably like half the length of your little finger. It's a really poor peg, and you can back it up with a sky hook, which takes time and physical effort. And I mean, you clip one rope in each, so you've got this sky hook and you've got this super short blade. And I mean, who knows whether that's better or worse than what was there originally, but it all just definitely enforces the fact that you just don't want to fall off this top move.
Having dispatched If 6 Was 9, it was time for the Headwall. Neil had climbed this section when he did the route way out west. He knew it, but was he ready to deal with the difficulties of having done hard climbing and having more hard climbing to come?
Having got to the break after If 6 Was 9, you've then got a real dilemma on your hands, because there's a knee bar rest, but you're in quite a strenuous position and you've got to recover enough to then take on the Headwall. Or alternatively, you could just escape off right and take the tick for if 6 was 9. And I mean, that's no mean feat. You know, you've just done like one of the hardest, if not the hardest trad routes in the Lake District. And, you know, it was more a matter of like, you know, are you feeling lucky, you know? And you're shaking out on this rest, and you just, all you've got to do is just nip over there and you can escape, and just, it can all be over. So like just, and also on the grounds that you know you're never going to fully recover, you're like getting it, you go, I've just got to shake my arm again, see if it get a bit more back, and oh no, am I recovering any, oh I don't know, and you're looking up at this Headwall, it's like looming over you, and you're like, oh. So it was a really quite a harrowing rest position, and the decision to leave that rest, it's almost like at an arbitrary point, okay, right, I'm just gonna go for it, and then you're climbing, and then like suddenly you're back in the flow. But that rest is really, it kind of drains your psyche a bit, because as soon as you get there, your conscious mind comes back in. So the climbing on the top Headwall feels pretty racy. You are running it out above bomber gear. There's no issue of this gear ripping, but it's slightly under a roof, or like under a little mini roof, so you will swing in pretty hard. I don't know, maybe it's 20, 25 foot, but by the time you've factored in all the rope stretch, you're going to be falling, like getting on for 60 foot. And the climbing on that Headwall it's not super hard, but it's also not easy. And a couple of the moves are quite low percentage and fluffable. In particular for me, the very last move, when you're miles out above your gear, and I do this dyno move, and I know from top roping that if I don't give it everything, I stop just short of the hold. It's one of those moves where you absolutely have to commit to it. So when I first led that Headwall back in June, when I approached via the easier start up the E6, I think when I was going up there, I was just pretty nervous about taking the fall. I mean, even though I'm generally pretty happy about taking long falls onto good gear, when I then came back and led Final Score, so having approached up if 6 was 9, I was more nervous, but it wasn't anything to do with the fall. I honestly could have been on a top rope. I didn't even notice the fact that I was doing that massive run out. It was purely about not wanting to drop it, because obviously if I dropped it, I had to climb if 6 was 9 again. And I also know just how rare the perfect conditions days are. So I was just desperate not to fall off, and I felt that pressure was worse than the pressure of fear of falling. And I started doing all the classic things wrong. You know, I was like really over gripping, and you know, started like rushing my foot placements, and I just noticed things were starting to spiral down. And as I set up for this last dyno, my elbows were up like this, and it was so close. Normally I catch this hold that I go for, like it's a big flat hold, and I normally catch it with all 3 pads, but I caught it just like on my first pad with 3 fingers like open, and I wasn't sure if I could actually hang on. So it couldn't have been more close, but luckily it all went all right.
British trad climbs are graded using a number and letter system, with E11 being the hardest currently in the world. The E grade is the overall difficulty and danger. The number is the hardest single move on the route. A 7A UK trad grade is roughly equivalent to V7/V8 bouldering.
Obviously people are going to be interested in the grade E10. What does that mean? Well, for a start, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to hurt yourself if you fall off. I mean, the hardest trad route in the UK, Rhapsody, is E11, and it's actually safe to fall off. It's a huge fall, but you're not thinking about decking out. The E grade is all about the relationship between the physical difficulty and the seriousness of the route. You get some examples that are super dangerous, but relatively straightforward physically. You get other examples that are mega desperate, like 8C, 8C plus sport routes that are safe. I'd say that Final Score, my route on Crag, is kind of bang in the middle. It's quite physical, fairly physically hard, but also fairly, like, in sections, bold. I think it's all too easy when you're trying to push your limits to get overawed by what you're doing, and also to get real tunnel vision about what you're doing, and just to let it start stressing you out. But you have to take a step back from that and remind yourself why you climb, which is because you love it. And you look at where you are, you turn around, you're in the Lake District. It's one of the most beautiful places in the UK. You're with your buddies, you're having some banter, you're doing an activity that we are so lucky and blessed to have discovered. I mean, every day I pinch myself that I'm a climber and just wonder how different life would have been if I hadn't discovered climbing. I still feel as passionate about it as I did when I was 12. And, you know, as long as you remember that that's why you're doing it, you can't fail. And even if you don't do the route on the day, you can always come back. But the only way you can defeat yourself is if you allow the experience to become stressful or unpleasant. You just gotta, you know, keep your spirits up. And as a very good friend of mine, Grant Farquhar, a former trad guru, said, you know, when you feel scared, just smile and you start to feel better.